Let's begin by looking at the overall findings in respect to the impact of property on the South African economy.
Godfrey, it was a very interesting study. We were looking at three things. We were looking at the GDP, we were looking at our contribution to tax and employment. And when you do that study, you look at a life cycle of a property, so from origination to transaction to end of cycle. So with the report, basically, one, in terms of the GDP, so we contribute, the property sector contributes, there's two, in each of those elements, there's two segments. One is the direct, the other one is actually indirect. So GDP direct is about 59 billion, the indirect is 132 billion rand. In terms of the taxes, the entire market or entire sector contributes 62 billion rand in terms of taxes, and that was an increase from the previous study, which we did in 2013, which was 46 billion rand. So there's a 32% increase. So this is what the taxes is what you give to the fiscus.
Right.
And in terms of employment, actually, it's 278,000 in terms of employment.
Yeah.
100 is direct, obviously, and the 178 is indirect.
Yeah.
And the major part of that employment is in the transaction phase, which is sustainable jobs, which is quite actually important.
And it's interesting you're having this study at this particular time, especially in the context of the debate around expropriation of land without compensation. And then you begin to think, if all land in South Africa was freed so people are able to own it and do what they want with it, the impact that potentially this could have on sectors such as property. And
no, absolutely. And before, the study, when we talk about impact of the study, we did the market study in terms of to understand basically what is the value of every South African market. So it said it's 5.8 trillion. So if I were to put value on every single property that you see in the country, it's 5.8 trillion. And at 5.8 trillion, the property actually contributes 78% of the South African total capital fixed assets. And fixed assets includes machinery, property, and transport. So the property contributes 78%. And based on that, and that would be what the GDP, the taxes, and the employment that we have.
Yeah. Be sure to send this report to the president, because I think he needs to see it and aid him in his debate around taking people's, well, I don't know, he is not proposing it, but there are political parties that are proposing it. Let's talk a little bit about the employment contribution.
Correct.
And the kind of impact that you see. We know, for instance, the construction sector has been under pressure for quite a while now.
Right.
I was bemoaning the other day the fact that Avenge, one of the biggest construction companies in South Africa, is now a penny stock. Outlook in this environment from what you saw from your study?
So look, the point, and which is quite interesting, and we work very closely with construction. So as I said, it's when you look at the study, it starts at origination, transactions, and then end of cycle. So transaction is where you maintain buildings, and that's why it's sustainable jobs. So the jobs will be there. It's not project-based. It's unlike in origination, when you start a development, they are project-based. So those jobs come and go. And so and then end of cycle, and if projects come and go, and there was no new project, you will, however, increase the end of cycle. So they are in the sustainable jobs, and it was quite intriguing to see 278,000 would come actually from the property sector.
One little factor, and I've been told we're running out of time, one little factor that I found interesting was the fact that you found transformation within the sector was not quite as big or making as big an impact as you would expect.
No, absolutely. So what it is that we see that in the areas where we're doing well, we have been doing well, but there are areas that we're not doing so well in terms of the elements, in terms of transformation. So the ones that we're doing well, you see enterprise development and socio-economic development, and where we're not doing well, it's actually employment equity, management control, and skill development. Those are the areas that we're not doing well at all. You do have the ones that we are still below the target, but we still have a lot to do, but it's still reasonable. So ownership and procurement. Ownership was actually 82% and procurement was 85%. So it's still below target, but there's still a lot to do still.
Absolutely.